Now what will it be? Death or exile?
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another installment of the Film Exiles podcast. Tonight, myself and the wonderful Grey from the Popular Opinion blog are here to discuss the Elton John biopic, Rocketman. Grey, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing well, Manu. How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing really, really well, and I'm really glad that we're gonna jump into Rocketman.
Yeah.
I don't think we've actually even really talked about how we think about the movie yet, so I think it's gonna be really interesting to just dive right in and just get a really interesting dialogue to go.
Yeah, I'm hoping that it's going to be fun. It was an interesting movie, so I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, it was interesting. It is not at all what I expected it to be. But why don't you go first and you give us your initial thoughts on Rocketman?
I had a feeling just from the trailers. I kind of knew that it wasn't going to be just a straight biopic. I had a feeling that it was going to be a little bit more of a fantasy type of thing, but not being overly familiar with Elton John's life story. I was surprised at how, just kind of like brutally honest the movie was. That I think was the most surprising. Like they didn't really feel like they really tried to sugarcoat things very much, which was really nice. They didn't really stay away from, kind of getting into, what his side of the issues were. And a lot of times you get to some of these movies and they want to portray like, all the problems are coming from the outside, everything is just the world coming down on the person and everything. But they were pretty honest about, getting to a point where he was like, yeah, I kind of had a hand in making things the way that they were in my life. And I had to learn how to deal with that. And that's really refreshing. I thought it was, I could not help but thinking, was it Dexter Fletcher was the director. And he's the guy who finished the last couple weeks of filming on Bohemian Rhapsody. Yeah. After Bryan Singer was taken off the project. And it's the kind of thing where it's impossible not to look at it. Yeah, it's impossible not to compare and kind of go, wow, how would he have approached doing Bohemian Rhapsody? Would he have taken it more of like, the kind of perspective or the kind of way of approaching the story that they took with Rocketman, or, how would that movie have turned out? So that's just one of those like interesting kind of mind games you can play with yourself. But I was pleasantly surprised. I had a good time with it. I laughed really hard a couple places. I got choked up. It's nice. It's nice to be reminded of how good it can feel to watch a movie.
Oh, I'm really glad you said that. I felt the same way. It's strange to say the least. And it's especially strange because, like you said, this film is really, really honest about the person of Reginald. He's a very interesting person in so many different ways. Like he was this magnanimous character on stage, and then when all of that is removed, you see that at the end of the day he's just a scared little boy. And I really liked how that was portrayed in the movie, and just the way that the movie starts with him in that like devil garb. Yeah, I think that just that image lets you know from the very beginning that this is not going to be your everyday biopic, because Elton is the devil in his own story. Yeah. And they tell you that from the very beginning. And then he sits down at this 12-step program meeting and he's like, I'm an alcoholic, I'm a drug addict, I'm a sex addict, and I'm a shopaholic. And
like, really, dude?
and I love that because because he from the very beginning we're being shown what we're going to see in the movie, and this is something that you say that the first scene of a movie always gives you uh it always kind of like lets you into what the movie's gonna be as it unfolds.
Yep.
And that's
At least
exactly
that's what I quite fervently believe, at
yeah.
least.
And I think that that's represented here because from the very beginning we see it that we're going to see the ugly side of this man and how he got to this point that he got to, that he needed to leave a concert to go and finally be able to ask for help to fight his own demons because he couldn't fight them himself. And
Yeah, not the facts of that portrayal.
I mean,
but
obviously, yes, but
yeah.
I'm going to keep it as close as possible I can because I'm sure that they took a lot of I'm sure that they took a lot of liberties with what actually took place. So I thought that the movie was really great. I thought that Taron was fantastic. I thought that he did a very, very good job of displaying all of these different aspects of Elton, and I also like that even the younger Eltons, the young boy Elton and teenage Elton, were also very, very good as well.
Yeah.
And that was a great surprise. So all in all, I thought that it was a really good film, and the honesty and the sincerity of maybe the facts aren't all there, but there seems to be like a truthfulness within the journey itself,
Right,
and I
right.
think that matters more than anything.
Yeah, I really thought it was interesting how the way the storytelling is framed as Elton giving kind of this is Elton telling his own story.
Yeah.
You know, nobody ever really, you don't have time to sit there and say, and then I woke up and I had beans and toast and a cup of tea. And, so the whole point is to get to the emotional core of whatever is happening. Pardon me. That's what's most important. So I feel like it was very, very smart. Like the movie is basically giving itself an out. It's giving itself an excuse to say, yeah, we're going to mix some things up and, the facts aren't going to be quite right and everything. But that's not what's important. It's more important that he expresses the feelings than it is that he gets the facts of his own story right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which I mean, and that's always a smart thing to do cinematically when you can build in something that allows you to make sense of your approach if you're going to be using a lot of visual metaphor, or if you're going to be doing things a particular kind of way. If you can build in something into the structure of the film that kind of like keys the audience into it and helps them make the transition into what it is that you're doing, as opposed to you just dropping it on them, unless dropping it on them is part of the experience, like the shock of it.
Yeah.
I always think that's a smart thing to do. You kind of ease the audience into, this is how this is going to go. So go ahead and get yourself calibrated before this really takes off.
Yeah, because like that first scene lets you know this is not going to be a by the numbers biopic.
This is not Walk the Line.
Yeah, like we are going to do some shit. Like, because again, he walks into the room in a full devil garb, like
kicks the door open with that blinding light behind him.
I mean, like as soon as I saw him coming down that hallway, I was like, okay, here we go.
Yeah, we are no longer in Kansas.
Yeah, and so yeah, all in all, I thought that the film handled itself and its story and its lies with great aplomb. I think like my favorite thing is when that scene when his first concert in America, when he's like lifting off of the piano and the entire room is lifting with him. Like that stuff is just so amazing. And like, yeah, it didn't happen like that, but fuck it. Like,
well, I mean, I like the fact that that's one of those instances where they were able to take, there's a photograph that was snapped. I guess he had just been like jumping up in the air while he was playing. And there was a photo that was taken of him when he was pretty much kind of parallel to the stage, you know, and he's just kind of like hanging there. So they're able to take that image, you know, that photograph that's you know, kind of a famous photograph, and they were able to kind of build a story around it within their fantasy construct, you know, and that just kind of like shows the, you know, the mindset of the storytellers in terms of how are we going to incorporate, you know, as many aspects of the very strange trip of Elton John into all this. And it says a lot about that, you know, the visual metaphor of Elton John actually elevating the audience with his performance, you know.
That's more how I saw it. Like, because I didn't know about this picture that you talked about. For me, it was that his music was just so resounding that it lifted people, literally lifted them off of the ground. Like, it was amazing to see that. Like, just to see it happen, it was intoxicating.
Well, that's cinema. You know, it's something that we talk about a lot. You know, how people don't, you know, too many filmmakers, for whatever reason, either because they are not comfortable with it, or because they have producers that don't understand it, or they're afraid that the audience won't get it. They don't try to push cinema as hard as they can. My wife and I just started watching an anime series that my little sister recommended to us, called March Comes In Like a Lion. And it's not like a wild fantasy series or anything like that. It's just kind of like set in a real, normal, actually kind of a banal world. But the way that they approach everything is they really like exaggerate the perceptions of emotions and the portrayals of emotions. And these things are like really, really over the top, you know, set against this really kind of like boring, kind of austere world that these people live in. And it's getting to the energy of the emotion, you know, and communicating, finding some way to get the audience to feel that emotion some way, or empathize with that, with whatever it is that character is feeling. And there's a lot of movies that they take this very observational approach to things, and you're just kind of standing back, and they don't really go for empathy as much as they want a sympathetic reaction. They find ways to manipulate emotion. They want you to feel something because of the stimulus that you're getting, not necessarily because you're making a connection with something or you're experiencing something. So it was really cool to see them do these things, and to say, hey, we're not going to be afraid to kind of step over a line and do something that doesn't make any sense, you know, and stage these musical numbers and everything like that, because they get to a point with the emotions. You know, it's not just about holding a slow push in on a character while they're giving like a 2.5 minute monologue and crying.
Yeah.
You know, there's other ways to get to the emotion of a scene other than just letting the actor just go and hoping to God that, you know, their performance doesn't end up looking ridiculous.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree with that. I do. So were you a fan of like Elton John? Were you a big fan of his music before you saw the movie?
Elton John is he's one of those people that have just been like part of like the background of my life. You know, my mother had Elton John records that she would listen to every great now and then, you know, at home. But in the 80s and in the early 90s, his music was everywhere. You know, he was all over MTV and VH1. You turn on the radio and they were playing stuff. And the radio stations my parents listened to played them all the time. You know, God forbid when The Lion King came out. Yep. I mean, you couldn't avoid it. You didn't have to be a fan of Elton John. Elton John just was. Yeah. You know, that's like saying, are you a fan of Breathing?
Yeah, exactly. Like there's some music that there's some songs that I've heard like all my life, and like I didn't even know that Elton John sang them. Like that's just how he just like seeps into the fabric of your life without you even realizing it.
Yeah, and he's been he's been fortunate enough to have a very long career.
Yes, yeah. Like
You
just
know,
very, very recently, a few years ago, he's still making music today.
yeah,
And
he just put out an album late last year, I think it was. He put out a new record.
and what I love about him is that he works with everyone. Like he did a song with Fall Out Boy a few years ago.
Hmm.
Save on their Save Rock and Roll album. I love that song. I love listening to that song. It's just and I love that Elton John would do that. You
You can
know.
find there was the year that Guns N' Roses had their big double album, and November Rain was the really big song. They played the MTV Music Video Awards, and he played along with Axl Rose for the performance of that song. It's like he and Axl Rose doing like a two piano thing.
Yeah.
You know, he played with Eminem
Yeah,
during
yeah, I remember
during the
that.
Grammys, I think it was.
I
you know?
remember that. Yes, yes.
This
I
is
do.
something really cool. My wife told me that I didn't know is when Eminem went into or was looking to get clean, Elton John was his sponsor.
Oh, actually, I had no idea about that. But if you're gonna get a sponsor after watching this movie, I get why you would call Elton John.
Yeah, I mean the guy's done everything.
Yeah,
so.
you could do worse than Elton John. No, that's awesome though. That's cool. And I love that he's able to stay relevant, to keep making new music, and his old stuff is still great to listen to
Yeah,
today. Like
but he's
while watching this movie, I found myself moving along to the songs and singing along as they were being performed. Like it's like it's very intoxicating music.
yeah, but he's not one of these guys that feels like he needs to stay relevant by like, oh, I'm going to try whatever the new thing the kids are doing.
No,
Like
no,
he's
yeah.
like, it's not Elton John out there trying to do trap, or anything
See,
like that.
just because you said that is gonna be stuck in my head like for the rest of the week. I'm gonna keep trying to imagine what that would sound like.
But he's just, I mean, he just continued on a journey. He's not looking to, somebody like Madonna, is always like, what's the new hot club thing? Let me go ahead and give that a try.
Yeah.
And always trying to stay relevant that way. He's just like, no, I'm just going to keep like doing what I do really well.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So do you feel like the film like honored him and like the history of his music and the impact that he's had on the industry?
I think that it showcased his place in it really well, but I also don't think the movie it's not a movie that I don't think was really designed to be a celebration of Elton John's music. You can't get away from it.
I think that's why I enjoyed it as much as I
Yeah.
did. Because a lot of these biopics always try to like make the lead like much better than they actually were, or they try to like make you feel some kind of sympathy and empathy for him. I thought that this film was very focused on being honest about, well, as honest as they could be while lying thoroughly
Yeah.
about the kind of person that he was to like the people around him.
Yeah. Well, it's not just that though. It's not about, I felt like in a lot of ways, like, of course you have to make the comparison, Bohemian Rhapsody felt very much like it was constantly saying, oh, look how great Queen's music is.
Mm-hmm.
It's like constantly reminding you of how like awesome Queen's music is. It's like, we know Queen's music is awesome. That's why we're here. We want something more than that. And I don't think that Rocketman was looking to play on, the feelings that you already have for the music. It's not just about reminding you, hey, Elton John's a great musician.
Yeah.
It really used the music to tell the story. It wasn't just, here's that song that you really like.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And like, for example, like when we enter the third act, and from very like we hear the piano keys of Sorry Seems to Be the Hardest Thing.
Mm-hmm.
And as it's playing, you see him going through he's like having dinner with his mother and her new husband, and you see the state of that relationship, and then it keeps on going, and then he's at dinner when he's pushing Benny away, and until Bernie, I'm sorry, respect, I'm so sorry, and he's pushing him away, and again, like, that's how you utilize the music within the framework of the story. And it's done time and time again, and it's done very well.
There's a lot of this very, very quickly, very soon into the film. My wife and I kind of like turned to each other, and we kind of like both looked at each other at the same time and went, does this kind of have an across the universe kind of feel to it? I don't know if you've ever seen movie that was made. Julie Taymor did a movie.
No, I never have.
About 10 years ago, I want to say, where it wasn't a movie about the Beatles, but it was a movie that used Beatles songs. It was a movie musical that used Beatles songs as part of its storytelling structure. So the characters communicated at times in the kind of musical parlance. They communicated through Beatles music. In a universe where there were no Beatles, like the Beatles songs were just their dialogue, their internal monologue. It wasn't that they were like, singing Beatles songs because Beatles songs existed in their universe.
No, I get it. That's actually pretty cool. It's a very interesting concept.
Yeah, and this movie kind of had that kind of feeling where the songs were part of the storytelling. So you're appropriating existing pieces of music. And recontextualizing the lyrics against whatever the scene is that you're playing it against, which I thought was which is, I mean, it's not new, but it was really used effectively. Things like using like your song, when your song. I'm not entirely sure what your song is actually about, but I like the fact that in the movie it became about Elton singing Bernie's lyrics back to him as a way of saying, hey, you're my brother, you're my friend. I really appreciate you, and you're very important to my life. And I thought that was just so incredibly sweet.
Yeah, I felt the same way about I Want Love. I did, which is, I think, the second song at the very beginning, when it's not just Elton, but it's his father and it's his mother, played by Bryce Dallas Howard, and the grandmother, and they're all kind of singing about the state of basically the relationships that they're in. Elton talks about being with his father and how that relationship affects him, and all he wants is just to be loved by his father, and he's just not getting it at all whatsoever. It's used very, very well. It's used at good moments. It's not just, we're just going to throw this in now. They really take the time and kind of like compose the film and the music within it. It's very well thought out.
Yep.
So like, did you feel like the film was like constructed like a musical? Because I did feel like that's not what I thought it was going to be going in, but the film really felt and acted like a musical for most of its runtime.
Yeah, I didn't really know. I knew that the movie was going to be somewhat fantasized in its portrayal of things, but I didn't really expect it to be a musical, and there's a difference between, let's see, what was it? A musical is a thing that has songs in it, and then an opera, I think, is where the whole thing is basically just, all the music and everything is the whole storytelling. There really isn't any kind of like dialogue scenes.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is. I didn't expect it to be a full-on musical. I didn't know how they were going to handle things exactly, but I really didn't expect it to be a full-on musical. Like, it's not just going to be, we're going to have some songs in here. It's like, we're going to like break it down. Let's have a full-on Broadway number, and there's going to be like people dancing in the background and, set changes. I really didn't think they were going to go that far. Yeah. So I found that really surprising, and it was kind of a welcome surprise too. I have never really been a big fan of musicals. My Bio Sister really kind of ruined that for me by being obsessed with them when we were younger.
Yeah.
So it's something that I'm just now beginning to appreciate because I'm finding the ones that speak to me and not just the ones that she liked.
Yeah.
So yeah, I found it really surprising. But no, I didn't expect it. I didn't expect to do that, and I didn't expect it to use the songs in the way that it did.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. That's is the last thing I was expecting. I again, like I said, like going in, I really thought it was going to be a standard biopic, but the movie kept me completely off balance through the first act and a half, I want to say, before I was able to calibrate to what it was doing. But I was on the ride the whole time. But I'm definitely not a fan of musicals, but I don't know. There was something about this that really sucked me in, and I think that a lot of that has to do with not just Taron's performance, but also the writing and the layers that were put on Elton's character, and I felt so connected to him from the very beginning.
Well,
You know?
the directing too, I mean, I talk a lot about the objective versus subjective camera and things like that. And I felt that this movie had a good kind of blend of things where it knew, the director Fletcher really knew when to kind of like pull back and just let you watch what was going on. But he really wasn't afraid to get the camera in that space and use it to help express the characters' emotional states.
Yeah.
It really kind of put you there. And it sounds ridiculous to say something like that because you say, well, that's just the way that that's what directors are supposed to do. But then you go and you watch a movie like King of the Monsters, and you see what a movie feels like when that's not really done.
Yeah.
So it definitely is an approach that not everybody is really adept with. So that also to me made a really big difference in how I was able to connect through the music and through the performance, especially of the Elton character.
Yeah, and also like the energy. There's this energy like that just jumps off the screen. During Saturday Night Alright, where he starts singing it as teenage Elton, and by the end of it, he's Taron.
Yeah.
That sequence is amazing. How they go through the carnival and the camera is just it's like just swaying and just following him going through this like crazy night. I was just so I had this huge smile on my face throughout that whole sequence.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's fantastic.
It's not just about throwing stuff in front of the camera, or flashy lights or anything like that. You really have to be able to really put the audience in that space, and you have to know how to shoot it so the audience feels like they are experiencing that along with the characters. And again, it sounds really basic and really rote, but it's not always as easy to do as people think, and it's not always something that's called for either.
Yeah.
So it's to know when to do it and to be able to execute it. There's a skill, there's a craft in there that I don't think it's appreciated enough anymore. That's why I keep fucking talking about it.
No, and I agree with you. I definitely think Fletcher, it's Fletcher, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I definitely think that he deserves a lot of credit for being able to pull off some of the things that he was able to pull off here. Because even when he's going. When he falls in the pool, and then there's this whole sequence of him being pulled out of the pool and having his stomach pumped, and having his stomach pumped at the hospital, and that just goes straight into him having to do that performance at the stadium, right?
Yeah.
Man, and
yeah.
the whole thing is just everything just falls together perfectly so well, and you're just like taken on this ride, and you're like. And it almost felt like you were in Elton's mind, because it feels like this is how he took in this period of his life, because he was so strung up on alcohol and drugs and sex that everything kind of like bled together.
Yeah.
So what was really impressive is that all of these things did bleed together, and it had this like intense feeling of confusion, but it all kind of still stayed on the tracks.
I mentioning those types of moments and just like the strange mishmash of emotions and psychological states he had to be in, that the scene where he kind of pops off on Bernie, backstage, and he's in that ridiculous outfit, and he's talking about how like, hey, nobody wants to see Reg White. They all come here to see Elton John, and it's this really intense, dramatic moment, that actually has a little bit of a catharsis at the end too. And then he walks out on stage wearing this ridiculous bird outfit. It's just like you go from having these moments of like this like absolutely like soul crushing admittance of, I'm not even the lead character in my own story. People don't want to see the real person. They want to see the person that I made up. Like the real me doesn't matter. And to have this like admission of that, and then to like 30 seconds later you're playing piano in a chicken costume.
I'm glad you brought up that moment because I adore it. I adore how he stomps away like a drama queen and then comes back and he's like, I'm sorry, and Bernie was like, I know. I know.
Like, you gotta
that's friendship. Like that's real genuine friendship when you understand each other's like ebbs and flows and ups and downs to the point where an apology is good to have, but you already know that the apology is there. And then I think that's the performance where he goes on stage and he's like drunk and he's upset and he's mean and people start booing him, and then he starts to sing, and then everybody starts to cheer with him again. Like everything, like they forgot about all of his mannerisms and all of his rudeness, and just the moment that his voice hit them. Like and what I liked is like even his musicians were looking at him and judging him, and there's a moment where the camera cuts to them and they're looking back at him, and when he starts to play, they just follow along. Yeah. And then the whole crowd just falls into his music. And it's just incredible to like that effect that he had, that he could turn people away, but then his music was so powerful that it could keep them in their seats.
Yeah, but there's also a sadness to that too. This like,
they're here for my music and not for me.
Yeah, it becomes this other layer of distance.
Yeah.
As much as doing, making music on that level and making music in that way is intensely personal, and you really are giving a whole lot of yourself, but even that still becomes another layer of obfuscation. I've been guilty of that same kind of thing in my own way in my own life, and I usually call it the honesty defense. Where you kind of you're getting to know somebody, and you kind of say, as opposed to being cagey and, kind of like tap dancing around things and kind of like trying to put on a good face and everything, I come right out there and dump all of my flaws and all my bullshit right at their feet in one big chunk and just kind of go, here it all is. If you can't deal with this, get out.
Yeah.
So it becomes this, your honesty becomes another layer of defense, or even a layer of attack.
It's in a way that you learn how to use it as a weapon.
You can use your honesty to keep people at a distance, and that's a dangerous thing.
I mean, and we see that in this movie because that's what happened, especially in the last act. Like when I mentioned before, the conversation with his mother and his stepfather and with Bernie. We see how he's doing exactly that, like just being brutally honest. And then when that honesty is thrown back at him, when his mother tells him that she lost his father because of who he was, he couldn't handle it.
Yeah,
So
that's an incredibly. I mean,
it was incredibly douchey. I am not defending it. It was incredibly douchey, but it seemed like they were at this point where like he had driven her to this point where she just didn't know what to do with him anymore.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of those interesting things that I think the movie, I think some people might see it as kind of a storytelling oversight, but I think that it plays perfectly into the mindset of somebody in his position where he was so busy feeling his own pain.
Yeah.
That he didn't really. It's hard to recognize the damage that you're doing to the people. To people around you. Even somebody like his mother, who I saw a little bit of a commentary from Bryce Dallas Howard where she was saying, she was doing research on the character, how she was saying, this can't be honest. You're turning this character into a villain. She can't possibly be this bad. And she went and talked to people who knew Elton John's mother, and they said, "No, she was a fucking piece of work."
Really? Wow.
Yeah, they said that this was not something, like, it may have been exaggerated a little bit, but not by much.
Wow.
So
that's interesting.
Yeah, to even have a person like that, you can still do damage to somebody.
Yeah.
You can still do damage to that person without necessarily knowing it. And I feel like the only time he was able to really admit the pain that he was causing other people was to the woman that he married.
Oh, that poor woman.
Oh, and that's exactly what his mom said.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and that's kind of like the first, like, for him, I think that was kind of like the first sign, the first time that he realized, like, my life is hurting other people.
Yeah. Yeah. Because he brought her into this marriage knowing good and well that he couldn't reciprocate love. Like, he couldn't love her the way.
And that it was going to be this demented funhouse, ride.
And even though it's a very short in the movie, I think it does a very good job of, like, describing what that relationship was like.
Well, it's like you have the big, beautiful, ceremony and everything, and then, like, it quote unquote feels like the very next day it's all just falling apart.
Yeah, they're sleeping in separate bedrooms.
Yeah,
they're having breakfast and they're not even looking at each other.
He's drinking, a whole fifth of gin, it looked like.
At least he mixed it in with some orange juice.
Oh yeah, you got to get your vitamin C.
I mean, how else was he supposed to go out there and perform? Like, how many shows, whatever that they had him performing every week? Because they worked him like a workhorse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he worked himself like a horse too.
That too. I think that was also an escape for him. Like,
absolutely.
to be on stage to escape everything else, and maybe the only place that he could feel like people cared about him at all.
Well, that's what the movie really comes down to, isn't it?
Oh yes.
That's what the movie is really. You get down to the real nitty gritty of it. That's what it's all about. This is a guy who just had this incredible emptiness in him that he just tried to fill with everything
he could find.
Yeah. It's hard to know what that feels like. It is really, really difficult to understand how, isolated and lonely you feel when you don't know what love feels like. Everybody makes jokes about it. We all make comments about it and all this kind of stuff. But most of us are pretty lucky, to know what it feels like to be loved by somebody.
Yeah.
And to grow up and live in a world where you don't know what it genuinely means to feel loved, and you begin to feel that you're like, you start saying to yourself, well, if I was somebody who was worthy of being loved, someone would love me.
Yeah.
So I must not be worthy of being loved. So what does that say about me?
And like the scene when he goes to his father's house,
Oh,
and he sees how his father is with his new family, and my heart broke for him in that moment, because then what else can you tell yourself except that, like, it was me, like, I was the problem.
Exactly. It's easy to point fingers at him and say, oh, he's just a horrible monster of a human being.
Yeah,
but then you.
And again, and also, you see it in the relationship with John Reed, which is played by Richard Madden, and those same things, manifest themselves, and And again, I felt for him because, I've been in that kind of relationship when you're with someone and you want them to care for you the way that you care for them, and you're not getting it, and you can't help but wonder, like, is it something that I'm doing? Is it me? Is it me? What is wrong with me?
Yeah.
What is not right with me that, and then his mother, like, just told him, you're never going to be loved properly. Like, she like, and like, all of these things just fell on him.
Yeah.
And where else can you go except the stage
Or the bottle.
or the drugs?
Oh, and yeah. It's look, I felt, somewhat disassociated from my family for a period of time, and I went through a breakup right around the time when, my brother had moved away, and my sister I was never even close to, and I like lost relationships, and luckily I wasn't there for very long, and I always had my parents, but even I got to the point where it's like you start to wonder, it's like, hey, maybe it's me.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm the thing. Maybe I'm the I'm the common denominator in in all of these equations, and it's fucking terrifying. So to like live every day like that, and just like, yeah, you wake up every morning and the first thing I would do is get blisteringly drunk too.
Yeah, yeah, and I can absolutely relate to that. When it's really hard to when you're in that space, it's really difficult to look at anything else besides, like, the role that you play and everything. And sometimes, like, you look at the smallest infractions and you wonder, is that where it is? And I felt that in Elton as well, that he thought that maybe if he wasn't the way that he was, if he wasn't who he was, that his parents would have never broken up, that they would have been able to love him, and that his life would have been very different and much happier.
Yeah, well, I mean, and also look at the fact that after he got clean, and he went through, it went through some therapy and kind of was able to deal with his issues. He stopped with the ridiculous costumes. I mean, he still dresses like every day as Mardi Gras.
Yes,
but
he's got really nice suits now.
Yeah, he stopped with the costumes. He stopped with the dressing up. He stopped with the pretending to be somebody else.
Yeah.
I mean, that says a lot about what being in that emotional place must be like, when you feel like, not only is it not enough that you changed your name and built yourself a new identity, but you go out there, the one thing that you do that's supposed to make you the happiest and most fulfilled, and you're wearing costumes and you're not letting people see the real you.
Yeah, and the movie does a beautiful job of, like, of communicating that to the audience, when he's hugging and accepting his younger self.
Oh, I love that moment so much.
Me too. It's one of my favorite parts in the movie. It's basically Elton accepting himself.
Yeah.
And so that's something that he had never been able to do. And that's what changed things for him. It was being able to accept the person that he was, that he had always been. And once you do that, it's much easier for the world to accept you as you are.
And you got to keep. It's weird, the comparisons you keep coming back to with Bohemian Rhapsody, because that was really kind of the core of the story in Bohemian Rhapsody too. It was this idea that you can't, you can't really be loved by anybody else until you love yourself.
Yeah.
But I really feel that, I think probably because Rocketman dealt so much more in metaphor and in fantasy, it was able to push that point in a way that Bohemian Rhapsody wasn't.
Yeah, and I think that has a lot to do with what you said earlier about pushing cinema. Like, that's the power of cinema. It can do that if you're if you're courageous enough and have enough belief in your audience to believe that they will go on this journey with you.
Right.
Yeah. So we talked a lot, but we haven't talked about. I don't think we've talked about Taron's performance. Well,
In a roundabout way, I think we kind of
yeah.
have.
So do you want to like go more straightforward about it? What did you think about Taron as Elton John?
It's I know that, you know, I'm doing my reading on the film, you know, and everything. Elton kind of encouraged Taron not to basically do an impersonation, you know, so that the movie has character of Elton John. Now, it's not really real Elton John, but I think that he really was able to create a character that I think encapsulates my idea of Elton John. And really the important thing is, you know, is he in playing this character, is he being sincere in expressing this character's emotions, you know? And I really think he was, you know, I think that he wasn't trying to be overly sympathetic at any point. You know, he wasn't trying to go for the big tearjerker or anything like that. I really feel like, and he didn't really at any point really feel like he was performing, you know, that he was really putting on a show as the character, which is kind of ironic given the subject matter.
Yeah.
But you know, I think he did a really good job of creating a person that felt natural to the hyper stylized fantasy environment that they created. You know, it didn't feel, it felt a part of that world, which is a slightly heightened reality, but it also still felt very sincere. And I'm real big on sincerity, and I'm real big on the smallness of performances, and that includes, you know, emotions, you know, the subtlety of emotions. You know, a single teardrop, you know, is much more powerful than full-on waterworks.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Yeah.
So yeah, I think he did a really boss job at that. I really do.
I think that comes out most, at least for me, in those scenes inside the 12-step room, where he's just talking to the other people. I those scenes worked for me so well.
Yep.
Because it kind of felt like everything else was being stripped away and we were just having a conversation with the man within the man, I suppose. And I like that, you know, over the course of the movie, during the course of the movie, the more time we spend there, the less he's wearing. You know, like
Yeah.
like I keep saying, like he comes in wearing the demon garb, and then he takes off the hat, he takes off the glasses, and by the end of it, he's just Elton.
Yeah.
And it really feels like we went on this journey with him, and that he, as a performer, took that journey himself. And there's so much, and I felt like playing this role, like there were so many ups and so many downs that he had to adhere to, and I think that he did it phenomenally. And there wasn't one scene that I was pulled out of it thinking, like, for me, it was just the character of Elton John. It wasn't Taron playing Elton. It was just Elton, you know, or Taron playing Elton, playing Reginald, playing Elton, you know, like so on and so forth.
You know, and it helps to have an actor who, you know, he's still kind of young in his career, you know, and still establishing so it's not somebody. It's like they didn't go for, oh, let's find, like, you know, a really big name.
There's no baggage on him, I guess.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. You don't look at him and see every other character he's played and start going, well, I see a little shade of that in this character. It's like trying to get it's like having Denzel Washington play Miles Davis, because all you could do is you would see
Denzel.
Oh, there's a little bit of the character from Inside Man, and I see there's a little bit of a thing that he did in you know, Book of Eli, and, you know, you're always seeing other pieces of other portrayals that they've made.
Yeah.
You know, so it shouldn't have to be like that, but that often helps a lot.
Yeah, yeah, but like yeah, but I think you're right. Like having this particular performer definitely helped help sell this fantasy to me.
Mhm.
Which other performances do you think like we should highlight?
Well, I don't know about performance, but I had to go home and kind of like look it
Jamie
up. 'Cause
Bell, right?
well, no, not Jamie Bell. Actually, the character that Richard Madden plays, John Reed,
Yeah.
is the same person that signed Queen.
Really?
He's the person that I can't ever remember his name. The Irish guy played in Bohemian Rhapsody, the one that they met at the cafe when Freddie Mercury looks like an angry lizard. That's the same. It's the same.
Is the same John Reed?
The same John Reed.
Oh, okay, that's cool.
Yeah, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Oh my God, he was what a bastard.
He was though. He was great.
Oh yeah, he was. But what a delicious bastard.
He was great. Like the scene where Elton comes down right before he tries to commit suicide in the pool.
Oh man.
And he's being orally tended to by like his assistant, and he just gets up like it's no big deal, and then Elton is just like overreacting and just yelling at him and just able to be like, oh okay, like it's everyday normal.
Yeah.
Like it's just
well, and that's one of those interesting things, because that's one of those moments where you really look at it and it's hard to tell like who was really like, was he really that bad, or was he really reacting to how bad Elton was? What was really feeding what was really feeding what, was it just a vicious cycle?
Yeah, and there's this gap in the movie where you're never really sure.
Yeah, and he's just distant enough too. Yeah. Like he's always kind of like slightly enigmatic, and they never really close that distance between the two of them.
No,
so you never really knew where they stood.
Yeah. Yeah, that's I actually I brought up Jamie Bell because I didn't even know it was him. He played Bernie, who's Elton's best friend. I had no idea during the whole movie that was Jamie Bell that was playing, and I don't know if it's the like how what happened in the transformation, but I didn't recognize him at all, and I thought that he was such. I thought that he did such a good job of like anchoring Reginald, not Elton, but Reginald, as he kept losing himself deeper and deeper into this life and this fantasy, and the outfits and the drugs. I felt like Bernie was such a great way of pulling him back to reality. And I felt that as an audience member, because I was watching the movie, I'm like, why isn't Bernie here? Like, if Bernie were here, like this wouldn't be happening. Like, why is he pushing Bernie away? Like, where's Bernie? Like it got to the point where in his performance, I was able to understand just how important he was to Elton's mental health. And like I cared so much about Elton that I felt like he needed Bernie by his side to be reminded of who he was, and I just love how their friendship is so beautifully portrayed in this movie. From when they meet and they have this instant connection, and they love the same music, and they're singing that song at the table in the diner, and then they're walking together in the streets of, I think it's London, and they just have such a great rapport, and it's kind of like interesting to think that is how that actual, maybe not exactly like that between Elton and Bernie, but that because they're still friends today in the real life. So it's really great to see that kind of friendship play out on screen.
And it's also another part of the tragedy of Reginald Dwight that there is that love there, but it's not
the kind
really
of love that he wanted.
Yeah, or maybe even needed.
Yeah.
Because sometimes just having a friend is good. It can keep you from the edge, but sometimes it's just not enough. It's not. You need something that goes deeper than that.
Yeah, and yeah, Elton made a move.
Yeah.
Elton made a move, and Bernie turned him down. Bernie turned him down, but they were able to remain friends, and I think
Yeah.
that was again that's
Well, even the fact that he was able to say, like, I love you. I don't love you like that.
yeah.
You know?
And like it goes back and then again they go to America, and Bernie is off with that beautiful tall woman, and Elton finds himself alone, and just Elton being alone, that just gave room for John to like swipe right in and make his move as well.
Yeah.
So again, Bernie, why'd you have to go, Bernie?
And that's kind of what it is, in the absence of that, because Reginald wasn't able to love himself. When that external love isn't present, you'll settle for whatever you can get your hands on.
Which was John Reed.
Yeah.
Who worked him like a horse and treated him bad. Like what he tells him, I'll still be collecting my 20%.
20% long after you're dead.
Like I was like, oh my goodness, I don't even know how you can say that to somebody that you like even once remotely cared about.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the What did you think about? Is there any other performances that you thought that stood out to you?
Bryce Dallas Howard.
Yes, she was awesome.
I mean, Sheila. I mean,
I didn't even know it was her. Actually, I didn't know she was. I didn't even know she was going to be in the movie.
Not until I saw the credits.
Yeah.
I was like, what?
The whole time I was like, "Is that Bryce? Is that Bryce? It is Bryce." Yeah, but she was great.
Oh, she was so. She's. You can tell. It's another one of those things where, like, yeah, she's awful to him.
Yeah.
She's not necessarily an awful person, but she was definitely awful to him, to Elton. And that's just, and her poor Fred, her poor guy, just trying so hard to just be a good dude.
Yeah.
And just like, hey, I'm, kid, what do you want me to do?
I love that when you meet him, they're just like hooking up in the car. And like he's still there at the end, like he's there throughout the whole thing, because the way that he's introduced, he's like some random hookup, but then he's still there.
But that's one of those things that, again, it's like seeing her with Fred is like seeing his father with his other kids. That you kind of sit there and you go, Jesus, it was me.
Yeah.
It's always been me, because obviously she can love and be loved by somebody else, so. The problem must be me. Yeah. And she was just terrible to him. Oh my gods.
Yeah.
And really, like, I'm sorry, it's like, this whole idea of like, what did you ever sacrifice? I sacrificed your father. He didn't want to stay with you.
No, he did. From the very beginning, he did not want to be there. Like he did not want to be there. I think I also want to give I wanted to talk about the young Reggies. Matthew Illisley, I probably killed that name, who plays the younger him, and Kit Connor, who plays the teenage him. I thought that they were both really, really strong.
Yeah.
The
youngest one, kid actors, there's always a little bit of an if with them. but yeah, the middle one, yeah, he really brought it.
And he sang too. He sang too. He's on the soundtrack as well. Kit Connor.
Yep.
Yeah, so I really enjoy both of their performances, and especially when the young one asked the father for the hug, and he was like, "Don't be soft," and So, what did you make of the depiction of sex, drugs, and rock and roll in Rocketman?
I've seen enough of these types of movies where these things, if you got to be honest about it. You have to be honest about the portrayal of these things and how damaging they are. And it amazes me, and I know it becomes almost a cliche. When you see these biopics and they keep kind of like covering the same ground, it feels like, but it's important to recognize, what these people are going through and why they use these things, and I appreciate the fact that this isn't just like, it's not like, like, like a Motley Crue story where it's like, oh, they use drugs and then bad things happen. It's like, no, why? What is it that drove them to it? Why did they feel that this was something that they needed to do? And I think that was by far more important, to understand it's not just enough to say drugs are bad. That's too simplistic. So getting to that place where you understand why he was using these things, what exactly it was he was medicating against, I think that was, that's fantastic. And the whole sex and rock and roll thing. I mean, it's all part of the same thing, in that space for that kind of person, it's all about distraction. It's all about finding a way to not have to deal with whatever's going on inside you that's too painful to face. Rock and roll becomes an outlet for your feelings, but it's not always a healthy outlet, and sex becomes a way to distract yourself, and drugs becomes a way to numb the pain, and I think this movie really did a good job of not just showing, the effects of drugs are bad, but really displaying what it is that drives somebody to that, and then how there is a path out of it too that doesn't end, in a pine box.
Yeah. I agree. I definitely agree with that. I think that the movie handled not only the effects of on him physically, because you could see it like just deteriorating him little by little, but on his psyche and on his well-being and on the well-being of everybody around him. We talked about a little bit that he wasn't just hurting himself; he was hurting all of the people that cared about him, and he couldn't even see it because he was lost in this haze. But what I really appreciate about the movie is the way that it uniquely drew these things. Like, it didn't just show Elton drinking and having drugs. It showed, like I said it earlier, it kind of like took us into his mind where we're like skipping periods of time and we don't know how many days have passed. And we don't know how long has passed, and we're going from falling into the pool to getting our stomach pumped to being back on stage, and again we have no perception of time. And there's this one scene where he's just like walking and like along these like naked bodies, and they're faceless. And they're faceless because he doesn't even know what he's doing or who he's doing.
Just going through person after person after person.
And again, it's beautiful, but it's like tragic and it's heartbreaking, but it's really entertaining as well. And I really give like so much credit to the director and to the actors and everybody who had something to do with it to be able to like create these sequences that made us feel like we are going through it as well as like being there. It's not just like we're not just like watching it from afar. We're like getting a front row seats to like the effects of it, because like there's one scene where he's on stage and then it cuts and then boom, he's waking up in bed, and then he's like his family's coming in and there's this whole party and we don't even know how we got here, and it seems like that's exactly what it was like for Elton, and for him to finally go to rehab and finally get that peace and to come out of it like so triumphantly, because he comes out of the program and he's happy and he's singing and he's strong again, and that's just so revitalizing to know that it's not, you can get to your lowest point, but it doesn't have to be the end point.
Yeah.
That's all I got.
No, that's great. That's really great. It's important, and it's easy to get to the end of the movie and go, oh yeah, great, he was fine, but it really is important to be able to recognize and portray the fact that there is a path. There is a path out of these things if you're willing to ask for help.
Yeah.
And I really hope that somebody sees this movie who might be experiencing these things, who might be having some trouble with these things, if any one person can see that story and be, inspired and empowered enough by it to be able to say, I need help, and then to actually go get it.
Yeah.
That has to mean something. It's got to mean something in some way. The movie should be more than just this piece of entertainment, especially with a story like this. It really should, and it'd be a crying shame for anybody, no matter how much you might not enjoy the film, to dismiss the possibility that it might actually contribute to somebody saving their own life.
Oh, that's well said. Actually, I haven't even gone that road, but you're absolutely right. You hit the nail right on the head there. So why don't we close this thing out? You want to give any final thoughts on Rocketman?
I think we pretty much, we covered a lot. It's just, on top of everything else, it's a really entertaining movie, and I think that's I don't want to say that's the most important thing, but to have all these other things going on, to be able to say all these other things that it's saying, and still be, because there are a lot of movies that are really heavy and have a lot of really powerful things to say that you can watch once.
Yeah.
But it's like, man, that's too deep for me to sit down and do it again. This is a movie that I think one of the powerful things about it, and one of the things that might make it helpful for people who need it, is the fact that it is entertaining. It's a movie that you can put on and you can watch and just be entertained, and maybe little by little these pieces of the story will worm their way into your brain, and they'll settle there and communicate the important information that needs to be communicated. But the movie is just a lot of goddamn fun. It was fun. It was fun to watch.
It was. It was it really, really was, from the very beginning to from bitch, get your dinner or whatever to the musical numbers are really, really good, and Taron's performance is great. His singing is so on point. It's like you said, it's a thrilling piece of work to just like you could come back for those things and then stay for the message within the heart of the film.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, I think that's it for tonight. Great. Why don't you drop your ad and we'll get out of here.
All right. Well, you can catch me on your tweet machine at only_Grey. That's GREY. And you can come read the blog, Not the Popular Opinion, at notthepopularopinion.wordpress.com.
All right. And you can catch me at ManUnited0710 on Twitter. And you can follow the Film Exiles at TheExilesNet or at the Film Exiles, both on Twitter. We are on Instagram. We are on Tumblr, RIP Tumblr. We are on YouTube. And you can listen to us on Spotify, Stitcher, iTunes. Well, wherever wherever you want, you can find us. So
we're the goddamn American Express card.
Yeah. Great. Thank you so much for being here with me tonight. I had a blast talking about this movie with you.
Anytime. It was a lot of fun. Thank you, Manu.
All right, and thank you to the audience for listening, and thank you to Elton John for blessing us with his wonderful music.
Absolutely.
Good night.
Good night, guys.